This is Dan Schneider, and this is May 19th, 2022 at about 9:06 a.m. Texas time, speaking with Ned Williams. He has just recently read the Vincetti Brothers novel, and we're going to talk an hour or two or whatever about it and his thoughts about it and my comments on his thoughts and stuff. So, Ned, take it away.
All right, hey guys, I'm Ned Williams, interviewing Dan Schneider for the Vincetti Brothers, which I think it's now been 5 days since I completed it. 5 days. Of course, Tumbleweeds comes before that. I don't think we talked too much about Tumbleweeds before, but let's just go right into Vincetti Brothers. Real quick, maybe it doesn't even matter, but when did you wrote this in 2010?
2011. Tumbleweeds I wrote in 2005, and it was a standalone book. Then I thought, well, I wanted to write, I had always wanted to write about these three brothers that I actually knew, the brothers that became Gino, Aldo, and Dino. In real life, there were only three brothers, but for this book, I made it seven, but focused on three. And then when I got to the end of the Vincetti Brothers, because I had these other two great characters that came out of nowhere, Big Frank Concetto and the Norwegian, I decided, well, I have to go and do something with that. And there came, well, I must make a trilogy. And then by the time I got to the end of that, I said, well, let me do a fourth book called 64, which wraps up some of the storylines. So what originally was a standalone novel in terms of Tumbleweeds, which was sort of a fictive version of my four true life books condensed into one, itself became a quartet. And this is the second of those four books.
All right, the second of the four books. Yeah, so let me see. My first question. I see you at the very beginning of the book. I mentioned you this in the email. At the very beginning of the book, you say this is what the book is. I'm not going to talk too much about the two older brothers, about Rocco and Tony. I'm not going to do that. But by the very end of the book, you decide, well, I guess I have to do that. And the cool thing is I mentioned that you actually talk about that. You're like, I told you at the beginning, I'm not going to talk about them too much, but you ended up doing that. And so I'm starting to wonder, how else did the book change between writing it? I'm sure it wasn't just, you mentioned Frank and the Norwegian, but was there other moments too where you just had a creative burst and decided to go with it?
Well, I mean, the Big Frank and the Norwegian chapters were the biggest ones. These characters just popped out because, and I'm sure there were smaller things, but something like, talking more about the brother, I think it's Antonio, who's the priest who gets caught up in a pedophilia scandal, although it's basically off stage. And then there's the older brother whose name I forget, who ends up being Rocco. He becomes an ex-con. And then there's two twins that are the youngest of the seven brothers, and they're the least talked about. But yeah, Big Frank and the Norwegian were the characters that popped out. And the reason they did pop out was because you'll see as you read, get to a Norwegian in the family, I make great use of real life celebrity cameos in the book. I do a little bit of that here. For example, the Norwegian chapter, a good portion of that is his meeting with a guy called Richard the Iceman Kuklinski, who was a real mafia hitman.
Yeah.
And sort of the Norwegians dick waving towards him. But I'm sure that there are, as I just mentioned, because I wrote this in 2011, which is now over a decade since writing it, I can look at it with the distance and objectivity of not having written it. Of course, I do remember certain things. If I were reading certain passages, I say, "Oh, that's that. Yeah, that." For example, and I had wanted to write about these three real life brothers for 20 some years, and when I was writing just poetry, I thought, should I do a long poem and sort of a modern epopee with one of the brothers, sort of an Odysseus-like character, and that didn't seem to be good. And then I thought of, after I did True Life, that I think there's a slight mention of some characters there that are minor characters that were also based on the real life Vincetti brothers. And I thought, well, should I do a memoir of them? I said, no. So then I did True Life, and I think I've sent you probably virtually all my books, so you're reading these, I guess, first. And you'll see how I think this Vincetti Brothers is what, like my 28th book at the time, and now including plays, I'm up to like 168 or something.
Jesus.
But but it's one of those things where you just the things come to you, and that's one of the things that too often does not happen. I think I mentioned in an interview I did with this British fellow, Ethan Pinch, that I had once came across a woman that I had liked and who almost got involved with, and I saw she was doing one of these typical kind of things where on her wall she would have post-its and she'd make a timeline of it, and it was an absurd sort of modernist take on making Moby Dick sort of like an LGBT tale, although it didn't have a whale or anything, and it was just ridiculous. And she would have these all the and everything was so defined that there was no room for the give and take of things that happen in life. And I was just thinking about free will. I was just arguing online as I was listening to some of this Johnny Depp Amber Heard bullshit trial, and I was arguing with this fellow about free will, and I art is probably the greatest example for the reality of free will that you can come up with, because if you had taken my life even up to just say a day or two before I put the first words down to the Vincetti brothers, and I push it out 6 months, this book would not be the same. There would be no Vincetti brothers without everything I have. It is 100% my free-willed. It's imprinted, and I created it. There is no way that dominoes falling this way or that way is going to produce the Vincetti brothers, or a great symphony, or Moby Dick, or a great film like Citizen Kane, or any Stanley Kubrick film you can think of. All of these things are things that are essentially part of that person, and you will it, you bend things to it. And I've had this argument with many people, and I don't want to get into the free will argument here, but art is without a doubt the single, even more so than science, because as I think I might have said in one of these things, it might have been with you, is science in a sense is inevitable. Someone would have discovered quantum physics. Someone will have discovered the theory of relativity. Someone would have invented the wheel if the person who didn't do it did not do it. But no one in an infinity minus one replays of this universe from the supposed Big Bang, or if it is eternal, no one would have ever written Moby Dick without Melville at that time, at that moment. And the same thing goes for me at this time, a decade or so ago, in writing the Vincetti brothers. It just cannot happen.
I see. So, leading off of that, I'm sure you're aware of these terms. A lot of people, a lot of writers online, they use these two terms. They call. I'm asking you about your writing, how you write a book. They call you're either two types of writers. They say you're either an architect or a gardener. And it's pretty self-explanatory. The architect will detail the whole book, like that woman you just mentioned, I guess. And the gardener, the metaphor, they plant the seed and they allow the book to just come about. It looks like what you did is you planned it a little bit, and then we did 64 chapters, and then you just went, but you allowed the muse or whoever to guide you wherever you go. Yeah. And what do you think about those two writing styles?
Well, I've used similar terms. I think they're fine enough terms in a general sense. I mean, yes, you have to always give yourself wiggle room. And I think I might have said this in one of these things with you, or maybe someone else, is that you can't over plan. You have to let those little things come. You have to let a big Frank flower in this book. You have to let the Norwegian, when he comes, flower. Because this book, I think, took me 9 months to write. It took me 17 months to write. I remember 17 months to the day to write a Norwegian in the Family. It took me about 9 months to write this book. And over the course of those 9 months, things will happen. When I wrote another book recently, I had accidentally hit a deer that popped out onto the road, a little baby deer, and I killed it. And that became in a later book an opening epigraph or a part of the book that would not have happened had that I not hit that deer. The same thing with a spy book that I did. I think I used an epigraph about this cat that ran out into the middle of the highway, and I had no way, because I had cars on either side, that I could swerve to not hit the cat. And as a cat lover, that really gutted me. So you have, but little things will happen. You know, I might have heard something listening to this Amber Heard Johnny Depp bullshit trial. I might, you know, some boss or someone at work does something stupid. Jessica says something offhandedly to me. I go to a store, and you know, I see some woman arguing with some clerk at a store and being a real bitch or something, and those things become the seeds for other interactions. I was just, for example, working today on this play on Robinson Jeffers, and you've probably, if you've read any of my essays, you probably know who Lauren Isley is. I've often praised his writing as a science writer. And one of the fortuitous things was Robinson Jeffers actually met Lauren Isley in 1929. So I dramatized this scene of them, these two similar type thinkers about nature and whatnot in this play. Had I not stumbled upon that passage, I would never have known that Lauren Isley had met Robinson Jeffers. And so these kinds of things lend themselves to the making of the art.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I've heard some people go about that way. Some people, it's just interesting the different writing styles people use when they approach a novel. One moment. Speaking of art, I have a quote for you from, let me find it real quick. I had to do this on my phone. Let's see, about creation and destruction. This really, when I read this is like it's like you were reading my mind. Where are you? Come on, come back. Here we go. Okay, I'll tell you the line. I would argue not. At the beginning of the paragraph, it's about 3/4 through the book. Thus, wherever you are reading this book, a mere few years or decades after it was written, or centuries or eons, is that enough for you to find it?
Oh, okay. You want me to look at? Let me see here. So,
Hey, you don't have to. I can read it.
No, that's fine. Give me what is the first 3 or 4 words?
Thus, whether you are reading this book.
Thus, whether you are reading. And I have typos. Thus, whether you are, and my multiple typos. So is thus, does it have a comma after it?
Yeah, sorry. Thus, comma, whether you are reading this book.
Okay, thus whether you're reading this book, okay, so that is on, let's see, page 573. It is but a dim memory of whatever life or descendants lead out of the study. These facts will remain, and it should be stated that while this book is a book on crime, in large part is not a genre of crime novel. Its main characters are criminals merely because I wanted to write a book on 3 brothers I once knew in real life, but whose final outcomes were unknown to me, so I had to dig into their lives and construct support eventualities for their existences. Okay, yeah, so go on. So I got it.
Right. Okay, got it. So about halfway down that, you're talking about the criminals and these mobsters and whatnot, and then you say right before you quote the Third Man movie, which I saw 2 years ago. It was a really good movie. Yeah. I'm glad that you like that too. Yes, these are not particularly nice people, but to that reader, eons and light years removed from my time, I ask you, have we eliminated these sorts of humans from our gene pool? Even more fundamentally, should we, even if we can? And then I would argue not, for the same thing that drives mankind to war also fires creativity. In essence, one cannot greatly create without destroying. In the process of communicating something to another in the most effective form possible, a great artist decodes and resynthesizes the cosmos to be more easily and beneficially understood by the percipient. And then you go into the Third Man. I think that's fascinating. Again, sometimes it feels like you're echoing inside my head. I mean, maybe it's been said 1,000 times. I've got no idea if you came up with it first, but the whole you cannot create without destroying.
Well, it's not original to me. Yeah, it's not original to me. But I should state, though, that within the individual, that isn't in general. For example, that doesn't mean that a great artist has to be a great destroyer. Just that as a species, the same impulse that will drive a Hitler to genocide, to drive a Ted Bundy to manic murder, or a Jack the Ripper, that will drive someone to be a sociopath uh, in their own little realm, their own office where they work, and destroy relationships and whatnot. That same drive, in a positive sense, can lead to great creativity. I'm not saying that Ted Bundy could have been Stanley Kubrick, or that Walt Whitman could have been a mass murderer.
Right. I think it's interesting though, because if you're an artist, you have all these monuments before you, these dead white males, whoever it is, all these artists before you, and some of them did it really well, some of them didn't, and there's some contemporaries who are doing it really poorly, and so it's almost necessary. It seems like good art to me should be pissing people off on some level. It seems like it's almost inevitable.
You don't have to juvenilely try to piss people off. I don't know if you saw, but Alex Sheremet and I did this show a few months ago on Jordan Peterson and whatnot, and I usually don't comment anymore on videos, or if I do, they're just minor ones. But I don't comment on my own Cosmoetica YouTube videos. But these people who follow someone like a Jordan Peterson, they're mindless idiots. And yet, so I think, well, I'm gonna just take. They'll write these nasty little comments or whatnot, but they watch maybe 2 minutes of it, and because you're not kissing Jordan Peterson's ass, they'll go off. And of course, there were like 3 other people we took on, but it's 98% Jordan Peterson comments, because these people, they're part of a cult, and they're too stupid to even realize that they're a part of a cult. And that's the lowest common denominator that you have to deal with. But you don't try to piss these kinds of people off. These people will be pissed off because they want you to think alike. The same way that the right wing here in this country that wants to take away the right to an abortion for women wants to, they're not trying to necessarily piss people off, but there are people that do these malefactive things, and if you call people out on it, whether it's a political thing, whether it's about following a guru like this Jordan Peterson, they're going to be angry. Well, fuck them. If they're not smart enough to understand what they have fallen into, have been easily preyed upon by someone like this Jordan Peterson, or some of these right-wing people. I mean, when I was 16, 17, I remember I walked several times, but one particular time sticks in my mind. This girl that I think I mentioned in True Life, this prostitute I knew who had gotten pregnant. She wanted, and it wasn't my child, but I took her to an abortion clinic, and this big fat white guy, probably 45, 50 years old, they had blood on these little fucking Barbie dolls or whatever the fuck they had, and he comes yelling, screaming at her, wanting to douse her with the ketchup, and I fucking took my foot and fucking kicked him down 5 or 6 stairs. And this is one of the things, is that, well, we're getting off. The people on the liberal side or the progressive side, they don't have the balls to stand up for their rights. And one of the reasons that we're going to probably lose the right to an abortion through the Supreme Court, although I think that'll fire people up, that within a year or two, most states will have amendments and get it back, the right to abortion, is because people, you have to fight in this life for what is right, and for what you consider rights, because there will always be people that will try to take things away from you, always be people that will try to limit things to only their group, and it's a non-stop battle. Now, hopefully in these eons and centuries that I mentioned in this passage, most dead white male types who are still breathing but are dead inside will finally realize that women, should and deserve to be treated equally, not because it's chivalrous, but because they exist and they're thinking beings. But these people are the same people who don't see women as equals. They don't see non-white males as equals. They don't see, if you prefer to suck a dick rather than lick a pussy, they don't see you as equal. And it's just nonsense. But there I go again.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. No, I feel you mean. I guess my only point about that, yeah, I understand the political part of it, but also when I said pissing people off, I mean you're rocking the boat if you're doing something good in anything in art, or if you're doing a really good job of work,
Because it
you
inspires
might be
jealousy.
from a level.
It inspires jealousy, and you've probably seen. I've written about what I call the divine inspiration fallacy. Have you ever seen?
Right,
Because
yeah.
people think, oh, and this gets back to free will. The Lord or some force out there. It just came to me. Even in looking up Robinson Jeffers and stuff. There's a lot of talk about it just came to me or something. No, your mind concocts it. It is all a part of you. There is no divine inspiration. It is all a part of you. That is what you are. And even if it comes to you on a subconscious or unconscious level, whichever term you prefer, it is still you. Your mind is still tilling that soil, whether you recognize it or not. You are the author. It doesn't come to you. No one is just going to automatically, be in a zombie state where they're doing automatic writing or they're painting, and no one's going to paint a fucking masterpiece like Rembrandt just because oh, Shiva has taken my body and now I can't control my hand, and oh, there it is. I painted a Rembrandt type masterpiece. It doesn't happen that way.
Right. All right, real quick. Let's go back. One more question about Big Frank, because I found Big Frank to be very interesting. He was certainly when you said that at a certain point in the book, you said we're about to meet a character who is far worse than Gino in most ways because of his actual intelligence. So right after Big Frank does his whole thing, and he Tony Delaguardo, that was the guy that he screwed over.
Yeah.
Tony thought that he was gonna pull one over on everybody because all the stuff happening. He thought he was gonna pull one over and get Gino, kill Gino at the same time and everything. And at the end, it turns out that Big Frank knew the whole plan, was setting up everybody, and ended up killing Tony Delaguardo, or giving him over to the Foundation, not the Foundation. That's in the New Origin. Giving him over to the Commission, and he thinks that it's a noble thing, but Big Frank secretly knows that actually he's got it. He got everything he wanted, and at the very end, he takes Tony Delaguardo's very young wife to on vacation. If you want to look it up, you don't have to, but if you want to look it up, it's as we leave the pair in their mutual embrace. It's right when they're having sex, basically.
Hold on, fine.
As we leave the pair in their mutual embrace.
As we leave the pair. That should be enough. Let's see. So, as we leave, as we leave the pair. Oops. Oh, let's go. No. So, as we leave the pair. Okay. Let me end this chapter with these goads to consider the brilliant and treacherous creature that Big Frank Conchetto is and was. Okay.
Right, got it. So yeah, the beginning of the paragraph begins. They're having sex, but then we get to almost cannibalistic frenzy, and there we go. Now consider this: off in the corner of Big Frank's and Victoria's hotel room in Bermuda, less than either of their bodies lengths away from the two of them, is a small beetle or similar insect, snared in a delicate web that somehow resists its motions and power, and making its way toward this creature is the creator of this web. This dilemma. So stop right there. When I first read that, I was thinking it's a metaphor about Big Frank. Big Frank's the spider. Maybe it is too. Big Frank's the spider. He pulled all these webs together to get what he wanted. And I had to read this a couple times as I was going through my notes. The next part is this dilemma beneath the scenes with which we have primarily been concerned with is, or was, no less real than those which we have detailed. Yet, we usually see only one and ignore most other levels of existence. We avoid the pain and violence of the cosmos by imposing a loneliness of sameness on ourselves. And if this loneliness swaddles and anesthetizes us, its desolation, a suitable enough narcotic for us creatures of thought. Lacking such loneliness and the ability to deny it, the moment of the smaller kind gives way to the injection of a realer poison to the beetle-like creature. In the minutes of moaning and sexual pleasure, not far removed from the scene, a small death marks its moment to the space-time continuum. Just as Victoria de la Guarda's ecstatic orgasm with her newfound lover reaches its oral apex, and Big Frank's 5 o'clock shadow is flavored with her schniz. Very funny. The cold of the compound eye becomes impervious to light. This is the part. The cold of the compound eye becomes impervious to light, and the layers of scenery reveal what a mere epiphenomenon life really is. Furthermore, it is not only lacks primacy, it lacks meaning. It is only we, through our minds and wills, who grant it meaning. We are the agents of what we mold, and in that clay we give or bring life its life that we call meaning.
That's a great passage. I was just looking at it. Very few people can use a big word throwing around to that degree.
Yeah, it was very cool. Yes, I read it a few times. You make quite the leap when you have the spider. Because again, if I was writing it, all right, spider metaphor, Big Frank's the spider. Okay, I get it. I mean, but the whole you go into the meaning thing. I thought that was very cool.
Well, here's the thing, because I've often used animals metaphorically. I've mentioned in a later book, I used the death of a deer over and over again as the drive for a character in search of his wife. And here's the thing. When you set up a novel, unlike this woman who had to post it, everything and say, oh, I've seen people who've outlined books or movies and need to inject a greater meaning into something here or there. If you are soaked within, if you are totally immersed in this total immersion style that really developed in this book, things are going to naturally crisscross, and they will bring meaning to each other just by the clash of their essences. And so I don't have to sit and say, oh, I have to make this scene of these two loathsome people fucking have a greater meaning. It just came to me when I was writing. I'm saying, oh, so let's see, here, they're fucking moaning here. Up in the corner is some spider and whatnot. And you will, as the reader, imbue what you want into it. You might see the spider as just a metaphor for Big Frank. That's a valid interpretation, I guess. But here I go into, if you've read someone like Lauren Isley, this is a very Lauren Isley-like moment where we're pulling out, and Big Frank, to that spider-like creature, whatever it is, looking down, is going to be smaller. And if you went farther out, there's a great film, if you ever want to look it up, I think it's called Powers of 10, made in the early 80s. And it's about a man and a woman. It's a documentary, only about 10, 12 minutes long. A man and a woman are at a picnic in a Chicago park. And so we see them from about 10 feet up. And then the camera pulls back to the power of 2. It's 100 feet up. And then it pulls back, and it's 1,000 feet up, and then it's 10,000 feet, and then every 10 power. And so as we go out every power until we're at about 10 to the 45th or 46th power, and we see the whole of the universe. And it's a great thing because it puts things in perspective, or the whole of the observable universe, I should say. It puts things into some really great perspective that you don't get, and then we slowly get. Then the second half of the film, the last 5 or 6 minutes, goes back down 10 powers until we're back to the couple in the park. And I always keep this in mind because, if you're driving out, especially like here in the Texas hill country, the hills are only maybe 1,200 feet or so at their apex above sea level. They're maybe 300 or 400 feet above the surrounding area. But as you drive out in that, even in those small hills, you get a sense of your place in the cosmos. You look at the night sky. My God, how can, the solipsism of the human race collectively, the solipsism of people, like I've mentioned again, just watching over the last week or two, these snippets of this Amber Heard, Johnny Depp trial, these two sort of LA narcissists, Hollywood narcissist types, that everything comes down to them and their career, that everything is about me. And it's like, fuck, I truly believe that art is, and to a lesser degree science, are the great things that humankind has constructed that will be around in 10,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million years or whatnot, as long as we're human or even beyond. But is the Vincetti brothers singularly as important as the cosmos? No, it's a part of the cosmos. No matter, you can't get around it. Shakespeare or Kubrick or Orson Welles or Kepler or Newton, all of these great minds, these great people, leaders that you can think of, are part of a larger whole. You can't get away from it. You and I, even though we're on opposite sides of this, little planet that we're on, we are still inextricably bound, not just because we're Skyping with each other, but some of the air that you breathed when you were a young boy has probably made it to my lungs as the things have circulated. Some of the air that was once breathed by Julius Caesar or Genghis Khan has made it to your lungs. We're inextricably bound. That doesn't mean, though, that you can't surmount that. And so this pulling out just 10 feet or 12 feet, whatever how high the ceiling might have been, is just to give a sense of perspective to what we've seen. Is that really important? Maybe to these creatures, but let's move on to these other people who maybe are not involved in Big Frank's wickedry.
I see. Yeah, you play with that idea quite a bit. I think at one point you say the room is the house. You know what I mean?
When I'm talking about opening doors and closing
part of the
doors.
whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating how you do that. I think I don't want to skip all the way to the end of the book, but you have that really great poem by Charles Van Doren, who I'd never heard of before. He's got that poem, "The bird died flying and fell in flowers. Oh, what a world but with them hours." Just it's fucking gorgeous right there. Let's see here. I think that's very cool how you do that. I'd never known.
Did you say
about
Charles Van Doren? It's Mark Van Doren, the father. Charles Van Doren.
Oh, that's his son. I skipped it. Yes. Charles Van Doren, the infamous intellectual cheat whose scandal disrupted the whole thing. Right. Mark Van Doren, a beautiful little poem right there. And it's something I guess you have you always had that when you write?
No, something's come up. I mean, this is one of the things I've mentioned before. Again, I don't know if I mentioned to you. My mind is like a convection current. So as I'm in the process of creating, whether it's a play, whether it was a poem, whether it's a book or whatnot, things come up in the process of writing that I don't intend. That's, the Gulf Stream, the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf Stream waters warm northern Europe because they go up, the west side of the Atlantic, and then they head towards Europe. That's why Europe, London, which is about, I think, the same level, or maybe even farther north than Montreal, is a lot warmer than Montreal in Quebec. And so if that water, the warm water from the Gulf, warms northern Europe, then it brings the warm weather on top of it. Then it sinks down to the bottom and goes back down, the great currents that go throughout the whole world ocean, and thoughts and things like that. I'll be writing something or I'll be working. I'll give you a perfect example, and I mentioned this to a young man. There's this trans man that I work with. She's going to be a trans man, and she looks to me for some guidance because she's only 20, or he is only 20. And so I was talking to him about I had recently come across this music reaction channel, a channel called Brad and Lex, and it's this young black couple who listen to hard rock. There's a bizarre meme here in the U.S. where black people listen to white music and comment on it. These funny white people, and it's odd to see black people like, damn, that white boy knows how to play, or something like that. But there's this young black couple. The woman's name is Lex, and when I saw her, it was weird because she's a very cute, energetic young woman of about 30, and she reminded me so much of this young black woman I dated in the mid-'90s in Minneapolis. I had met her at this store that was run by the pop star Prince, and there was poetry readings every Sunday. And so I knew her for about 6 months. I finally asked her out, and we went together for a couple of months, fucked around a little bit, this and that. And then she decided to move to a suburb, and apparently, even though the suburb was closer than Minneapolis was to where we were, she ended things. So fast forward, I actually saw another woman a few years ago I worked with who reminded me a bit of this one. But this woman who's called Lex, she actually has, like, she's a pale, a lighter skinned black one, but has freckles on her face, which is really cute. And I didn't remember. In my mind's eye, I had forgotten that this woman that I was involved with, who was about 4 or 5 years younger than me, also was a black woman who had freckles on her face. And it wasn't until I saw the freckles on this woman on this music reaction channel that I remember that. That's what I mean by a convection current, because in my mind for all these years, when I would think of her, I forgot about the freckles on her, over her nose and face, and it's odd, rare to see a black person with freckles, obviously, because their faces generally are, going to have the melanin that's going to be more, at least, in their face and the stuff exposed to the sun, more, color congruent. And yet I see this, and instantly I said, God damn, how the hell could I have forgotten the freckles on this young woman that I was involved with's face? But there's the convection. It came up. Now, I bring this up because let's say if I was writing, and I think I did write a play about her, but I never mentioned the freckles because at that time, a year or so ago, I hadn't seen this music reaction gal. But these little details will come to you. So probably maybe at some point, if I write a future play or a book and I mentioned that I wrote a play and how I forgot about it, or even if I don't do that, these little things come and they stick with you and you don't recognize them, but boom, something will bring them up. It could be my reach artistically, thinking of details and saying, oh, I'll give you another example. I was adopted as a 2.5-year-old child. I had many major medical problems. So my parents, who were the oldest people at the time in the late 60s to ever be approved for an adoption, were allowed to adopt me. And I remember coming out of the adoption agency the first day that I was with my parents. I was 2.5, going closer to 3 maybe. And I remember them walking me down the street outside the adoption agency, and I remember a hill. Years later, when I went to look for my natural family, I went back to the adoption agency, and it's on a slight incline. But what I thought was a hill in my mind was merely a slight bump of 2 or 3 inches of the pavement. But because I'm a little tot, that seemed to me to be a hill. And it wasn't until I went back to that same spot 20-some years later, 24 years later, whatever it was, that I was wrong. It wasn't a hill on that. We weren't on a hill. It was just a little rise, a little bump, that because instead of being 6 foot tall or 5 foot 10 inches off the floor of my eyes were only 2.5 feet or 2 feet off the ground. And so the loss of the detail of this young woman that I was intimate with over a quarter of a century ago, her freckles didn't come back to me until I saw this music gal with the freckles, and the fact that it was almost a quarter of a century after I had left this place, and in my mind I always remembered that hill. It was wrong. These things come back to you, and those are the kinds of things you have to jump on, because everyone has those kinds of details. They may not have a black young woman who's a former lover who had freckles. They may not have ever been adopted and misremembered something as a tot that they took with them to adulthood. But I'm sure that there is a woman, or I'm assuming you're straight, or a man if you're not, that there's a detail of a former lover of yours that you have forgotten, that when you're 42, you will meet someone who has a voice similar or a look similar, and you'll say, oh, that reminds me of Juliana, or whoever your girlfriend might have been, or something that your father might have said to you in giving you advice that comes back to you, maybe just listening to something I said. These are the things that evoke those things that say, yes, I get that. Alex recently did a thing on Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5 versus Gravity's Rainbow. I don't know if you saw that or you follow Alex Sherman stuff, but those kinds of little details in Vonnegut's novel are. There's many reasons it's a much better book than Gravity Raids, but it's those kinds of reasons that get to you and say, yes, I understand what Vonnegut is saying. That make that book a great book, that make the Vincetti Brothers a great book, and the vast bulk of my written work great itself.
Yeah, I see. I've read a little bit of Vonnegut. I read Cat's Cradle, really great book. I've not, because of you actually, I decided not to read Thomas Pynchon. I decided not to do it.
Well, I will tell you, if you ever have I don't know how quickly you read, a week or two to waste, it is always good to experience bad films or bad art to a degree. You don't have to read everything of Pynchon, but if you read his stuff, because that will make if you read, for example, and I would say Google Alex's Auto Machination site, watch the 2-hour or 3-hour video he did with this fellow Joel Parrish, and they will quote things, and you will see from just what they are quoting why Vonnegut is a better writer and why Slaughterhouse-Five is the book that Pynchon wished Gravity's Rainbow could be.
I need to see that video. I need to see that. I'd love to see the explication between those two. I did start one Pynchon book called Inherent Vice at someone's recommendation.
Yeah, that's one of his.
I know. I've heard about you should read bad stuff to know how to write good stuff. But the problem was it wasn't just bad; it was very boring, and I can do one or the other, but I can't do both of those.
Okay.
So I think I should ask you again about the actual brothers in this book. All right, so these three brothers, the main ones that you read about, Gio, Aldo, and Dino, they are real brothers who you knew, right?
Yes. I mean, obviously not the same name, but.
Right. So
I wanted all the male characters to have names that ended in O, just to give it a little kind of flavoring.
Okay. So Gio's the Gino. Sorry, not Gio, not the twin, not the twin. Gino. He's the most hardened criminal of the three middle brothers. Mm-hmm. I got this really great quote. I want to read it. At the very end, not his end. I love what you did with him, by the way. Made him to like a little fat bastard. Which, because I know guys like that. They're like really tough in high school or whatever, and they've grown up and they're just like they let themselves go and they're disgusting. Anyways, at the what you call almost the climax after Gino and Joey Frico maybe they go into the facility. They think that they're going to go kill Dario Sandoval, but they've been set up twice basically by Delaguardo and also Big Frank. And, Delaguardo doesn't know about that. At the very end, they do all the violence. They go through it. The very last paragraph. I guess if you haven't read this before, if you haven't read this in a long time, obviously, then I think you should hear it again. The very last one is, but these are just thoughts, germane thoughts for a change, to be sure. For one, the likes of Gino, but that's all they were. They solved nothing. They did not ease his breaths. As he made his way back into the night, Gino could see the outline of Joey's form waving to him, and he waved back, happy as could be, still covered in blood. As he dragged himself into the nakedness of the aftermath, he saw Joey's face did not share his joy. But before he'd let Joey ruin the moment, he turned elsewhere and, for a reason beyond his kin, longed for some greater mind or soul to inspect it all, to lick his wounds like some mother wolf to her ailing cub, even as part of him sought to devour the meaning of it all. This still to be formed violence that he brought into a world beyond meaning and intent. Yeah, I thought that was a very good way to end that whole thing. To have him, he's like enraptured with what he's just done, and you still have Joey's still very cautious. He still thinks like, dude, man, we're being set up. He like basically knows it the whole time.
Well,
it's a great image.
I think at the very beginning when I described Gino, I might have said it within the book. I know I've said it outside of the book that if this would ever be filmed, it has to be a black and white film, because when you get to read A Norwegian Family, that's 1960s Technicolor. But this is the dirty 1970s, gritty. It has to be black and white. And I think I have a great scene where I describe Gino's face and how ugly he is. physically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and Gino is more like an animal. The real Gino did some of the stuff reputedly, from what I heard, that I based Gino on, but I, he he was a shorter guy. He was an ugly guy, but he was. There was a television show in the 1970s called Welcome Back, Kotter, and there was a character called Juan Epstein, and Epstein was a Puerto Rican guy who was on the short side, who was supposedly the toughest kid in school. And so Gino, in a sense, is like that. I knew the real Gino before that show came on, but just to give a cultural reference point, so Gino was one of those things, and then he sort of disappeared. The real life Gino. The story was that he had gone to jail, or that he had been killed or something. I do not know whatever happened to the real Gino. I don't know what happened to the real Dino. I have, however, found the real Aldo. I haven't contacted him, but I have found the real life Aldo, and he's not in particularly great shape from what I can tell, in terms of his own personal history. But I won't go into any further detail. But uh, the Gino character, um, he's a good example of a character that's not likable, but everyone has known a genotype. It might not have been, it might have been a bad boss who was a Gino. There might have been a former lover that was a Gino, but and not again to that extreme, that murderous, raping extreme. He also, that great scene where he rapes Aldo's ex-girlfriend. Um, but
Cindy.
yeah, a good part of it, Gino too, I did base upon this great film by Luchino Visconti called what is it? Rocco and His Brothers. And there were three main characters there. Now that's one of the reasons that I decided to also use that as a basis. There were a couple of scenes, like a scene in a restaurant that's also similar to Rocco and His Brothers, where Gino isn't granted a seat with his girlfriend Cindy McGee, I believe is her name. Um, uh, and so Gino is a patchwork of the real Gino, some of what happened in this Rocco and His Brothers film, and then just other stuff that just naturally came.
So in the very beginning of the book, you say that Dino's your favorite. So, and I guess in the real life, you spent a lot of time with Dino.
Yeah, and there's the scene with Dino and the handball, which was a real scene that happened from life. Remember the handball scene with Dino?
Yeah, Spalding and his friend.
Yeah, and that is a takeoff of a great John Berryman poem, the Ball poem. If you Google the Ball poem by John Berryman, you'll see how I took that and the real life incident, and I used that as, again, that's sort of like that spider in the corner watching Big Frank fucking.
Oh, that's interesting. That's fascinating. Yeah, I enjoyed that scene. It's too bad about Aldo. I was hoping you to tell me that you knew where Dino was and he was still alive. I really liked him by the very end. I liked at the very end how the final chapter was for him, because he had gotten some of the least screen time.
Well, because he was also 3 or 4 years younger than both Aldo and my doppelganger Manny Cole. Me, Gino was 2 or 3 years older, and so he was the little brother, and he seemed to be the one on track to, if not a great life, at least a bit more of a normal life. Whatever's happened to him, I could not say in real life.
Well, I think as a reader, I really appreciated how he was the end, the capstone. He was basically the end of it, and he could wrap things up. I really liked how he met Gino's little bastard. I can't remember his name. Oh, Leonardo. I like how he met Leonardo.
I forgot about that detail, so it's interesting to learn about that again. And that's a character that now that you mention it, who knows? I don't think I'm ever going to have Gino ever appear. He's mentioned by some characters here that later, the last novel that I did, called The Grand and the Glorious, one of the two major characters is Joey Greco, and Joey Greco, you know, we see him 40 some years later, 40, 45, 50 years later from the events of the Vincetti brothers, as he takes over the Maravelli crime family and basically uh, ends it by his own incompetence and certain other things. But you know, a character like that, Leonardo, you know, this is one of those things that when I'm an old man and I'm looking for, you know, I'm like, I don't have any ideas. I go, oh, maybe I should pick up on that Leonardo character, which again I totally forgot. But I've also, you know, this is why it's good to create this kind of universe of characters. In modern times, especially with the Marvel shit and these comic book characters, it's way overdone because very few of the characters have any depth, and those that have some kind of depth are just pounded into the ground, you know, by things like you know, how many iterations of the Joker and Batman do you need? How many iterations of Lois Lane and Superman do you need? Or of Bruce Banner and the fucking Hulk? It's like these are juvenile characters. Big Frank is a far scarier character than, what is it, Thanos or something? You know, in the Marvel
Yeah.
universe, because you know the chances of there being a real Thanos in you know, going around with universal kind of power is next to nil. I mean, you know, if you look at the Star Trek universe, there's things called like the Q that are supposed godlike creatures or something. Maybe there could be something like that, but some kind of creature like that, why would they even bother with that? But on our level of existence, you want to avoid the Gino Vincettis and the Norwegians and the Big Frank Conchettos of the world, because they could really do you damage. Whereas a character like, you know, Thanos is just, you know, mythological bullshit, you know, tried to make modern. You know, there's no child has nightmares of a Thanos. But if you met or you read this book, there's a good chance that you might have some kind of idea of Gino Vincetti coming after you.
Mm. Yeah, I thought it was very fascinating. Yeah, Big Frank was very fascinating. I thought it was cool how I think maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm not sure if you remember, but you have two World War II stories basically. No, there's a third one. There's that old drunk man who throws beer cans at people out the window. There's that man, and it's not told by him. It's told by somebody else. But you had this one World War II story from a vet who was in the Aleutians. Was that the Aleutians?
Yeah, and he gets his head blown off.
Right, but the guy gets his head blown off. But that's more of like a more heroic story you hear. That's get the job done, and we're all very, you know, the one guy, he's very heroic. He gets his head blown off, but yeah, he is heroic or whatever he is. And then you have later you have Big Frank's story, and Big Frank's is almost the complete opposite, where there's no heroism, where they try to rape that Japanese girl, and then he ends up murdering the lieutenant and everything. And actually, wow, yeah, what you say about Thanos, you're right, but the whole like that probably happened in World War II. I could totally see that happening.
Well, I did base that on a documentary I saw, the whole illusions thing and the CBs that Big Frank was on, and in fact, I have the formation. Probably the next major big novel of several 100,000 words that I will take on. Like my next book, after I get through, I'm doing now Jason and the Argonauts and Medea plays alternating with poet plays. But once I get done with them, my next book is probably going to be a children's book about my youngest cat and her obsession with this moth that comes to the window. But the next big book might very well be this World War II book, because I want to go back to the Big Frank thing and not focus on Big Frank, but maybe the captain or his commanding officer that Big Frank kills in a very gruesome way, and have that character's brother trying to investigate how his brother really died. So that would be my into that book. And this is again where having an artistic, a creative universe comes in. But those particular incidents, like that one about the guy getting his head blown off, was literally from a documentary that I saw on the Battle of Atu and the Battle of Siska and the Aleutians. It's the only World War II battle that ever took place on American soil, North American soil, and it. I mean, there was some bombs that were thrown onto California by the Japanese, but there was no actual battle between the Japanese and Americans. But again, it's one of those things. I did not plan that, but in the course of writing this book, I said, I probably got 20 some chapters out of the 64. And I said, I need a few other chapters, and let me go to World War II because Big Frank was born in I think 25, so he's the perfect age to have gone to war. And similarly too, I have the World War II background with the Nazi invasion of Norway. That gives us Ronald Holdvan, who was Norwegian.
Right. Yeah, no, yeah. I love the World War II scenes are really great. I actually forgot I was reading a crime novel or whatever you want to call it, semi-crime novel. Crime novel is not a crime novel. I forgot I was. It's like it felt like a actual World War II history, or actual account. It was very interesting. One of the things I really like about the Vincetti brothers and the other stuff you sent me to, but especially they all kind of have this, is that they're obviously they're not just novels, but they seem to also be really great textbooks for a lot of things. And part of it is like the Aleutians. I didn't know that part about American history at all. Never heard about that. And it chronicles little bits of history and also pop culture. I remember in True Life, you went on one of the stories. You focused really on not so much on Watergate. Maybe there was one on Watergate with Nixon, but also something he did in the '60s, maybe something he did to another politician, maybe.
Well, Richard Nixon figures into the next book, the A Norwegian in the Family. There's a couple of great chapters with Richard Nixon in it, so you'll enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, I like how you've done this, where it's like it's more than just it's definitely not a conventional novel, and I like how you not only you weave in some history and pop culture and a lot of these things that I had no idea about, but also your opinions on art and things like that. I actually have a great quote. Speaking of which, I'm not sure what page it's on, but I can just read a little bit of it. You're talking about art and what makes great art, and literature is the highest, and then poetry is higher than that a little bit. First, one should acknowledge. Let me start a little further. And this is a good question, as it raises an even better question. What exactly is the book's main narrative of the Vincetti brothers? Indeed, what is its goal, and why am I writing it? First, one should acknowledge that all art, and I would argue that literature is the highest form of art, for it is the most reliant on the least, mere squiggles on some medium, as well as dependent on a good recipient, as well as about communication. It's about how something is communicated, not the thing communicated. It is that art is a verb, not a noun, in its most essential form. Yes, one can have a great idea, but if it is communicated poorly, it is not great art. And one can have great technical skill and accomplishment, but sans a great idea, it is not great art. Again, it's like you're reading my brain or something. It seems like that idea. It seems so obvious. It's so obvious. Like why would that not? Those two things, a great idea and great skill, come together to form something fantastic. But it seems like nowadays people don't care. It's like they have a good idea and then they never try to improve their writing, or their writing's pretty good, but they just write about the same things that they've written about time and time again.
Well, I've said many times, when I argue about art, and I think the long view, people in 50 or 60 years, once I'm long dead, they're going to look back and they're going to say, this guy was so much better than the people who were being published and lauded in their day. The things he say are not only true, they are obviously true. How could people be this stupid? And I think it will be black intellectuals, it'll be women intellectuals, feminists, because what I'm saying, this is why art transcends all this bullshit politics of the day, is that what you just quoted is obviously true. It's not. There's not even a question of it not being true. Art is not political. It can be political, but it doesn't have to essentially be political. And I think I've said it before, and I might have said it in that book. If you say all art is political, I can say all art is about poodles, and using the term about poodles is just as valid in any question you're going to say about art. All art is about poodles. Yes. Well, if you don't write about this or whatnot, people will often say, well, all art is about politics, and if you're not talking about politics, you're really talking about politics, and you're not talking about it. And I can say, well, all art is about poodles, and if you don't mention poodles in your art, you are still talking about poodles in your lack of mentioning about poodles. It's absurd. It's the way people they twist and gyre themselves into all of these things that to try to put forth these ideas that are not unique to them. And a lot of what I've written about, the things that I posit, are not, they don't generate solely from me. Some do. You know, the idea of my writing style in this book, you know, total immersion, that's unique to me, to soak you totally in. And there are a number of other things. But when I talk about techniques I use, like the spider up in the corner watching Big Frank fucking, that is not something that is unique to me, and I'm not going to claim it's unique to me. But I do that, and I do it better than other people have done it, because it will reach into you and it will make you remember these moments. And these asides, these breakings of the fourth wall, other people have done that in all other types of media. But are they necessary? Are they done well? Or are they just someone being didactic? I am never didactic. There are some works that some people have read of mine where they'll say, "Oh, that's didactic." For example, I did a kids book, and I've done two versions of it: just the plain kids book, and then the more adult version, where I do have two characters talking about what's going on in the book. But it's not so that they can be didactic to lead someone in. It's to give a basis of the character, and give the stupidity of your average character, and the parallax between the simplicity of what's going on in this children's book, and how some people, one of the two characters that are in conversation about that book, is not that bright. But other people who don't, who just read it, who've read it the first time, think that I'm being didactic. But it's not. I'm never going to talk down to you or any person. So if you see something that seems to me to be didactic, think again, and step back from your own prejudice and look at it fresh.
Yeah, yeah, no, I don't think you have been. Yeah, your writing style, your prose style is actually really interesting. Okay, you say it a few times. Like, how have you ever read a book that it's so simple yet complex at the same, simple yet deep at the same time? I've read a lot of books that were. I read this horrible. It's not a book, but I read this horrible essay by Eve Sedgwick once. I'm not sure if you're even familiar with her,
No.
but she wrote a book about how there's gay shit and Billy Budd, and it's called the epistemology of the closet. It's not wonderful, but she basically obfuscates the whole thing in complicated words. Like you can't understand it for the life of me. I cannot understand that thing. She's clearly she's got a lack of knowledge about what she's actually talking about, but she's trying to hide it the whole time. And so how you wrote these books, where it's like very, I can understand it, I can get into it. It's
Well,
very very much appreciated.
it's a way of incorporating the construction of the work with the work itself, so that imagine if you were watching a video of the construction of a building, and after the second floor is constructed in, say, a 15-story building, you've completed the second story, but someone is explaining to you, now as you go up, things are going to get less stable. So as you go up, you need a stabilizing force for the goddamn building. This is why we do this by the sixth story, let's say. You know, whatever it might be. That becomes part of the telling. The telling of why it's being done becomes part of the process itself.
Hmm. No, it's fascinating. I feel like reading these books all the way from True Life is that it's like I've got a behind the scenes look to how you made it at the same time as I'm reading it. I'm not sure if anyone else. I kept on when I was reading this book. I kept on like thinking about Moby Dick, but really Melville. I mean, he's got those encyclopedic passages and stuff like that. And a couple times he mentions that he's writing it as I'm writing this in an attic in New England or something like that. He's got those moments, but I can't really think of anyone else who's ever. Maybe I'm just not very well read when it comes to this kind of stuff, but who has this meta where they're like breaking the fourth wall with you, talking to you, saying like, "Oh, this is why I'm doing it this way." I think that's fairly unique. Maybe you've come across that before.
Well, there are books that have tried certain things. And I saw this on I commented on something, maybe it was on Quora, where I was talking about art, and this idiot saying this guy clearly has never read, and he mentioned Don Quixote and Tristram Shandy. Yet my own books take some of the things in those very early novels, very raw novels compared to modern stuff, and go way beyond it. I think it might have been a comment I made about Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow. It might have been something. I don't think it was in Alex's video, but these people they clearly don't get anything from the things they read. Because if you were actually to read Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow and read Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five back to back in whatever order, you will clearly see that Vonnegut is doing everything that they claim Pynchon was to be doing, but he's actually succeeding at doing it. And this is one of the things that you can go on. Imagine. Let's bring art down to the level of sports. It's one thing for someone to say, I watched this video recently of MMA fighting. You know what MMA fighting is?
Yeah.
Mixed martial arts fighting. So here in the U.S., they have something called UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship, mixed martial artists. And there was a video of about 6-7 minutes length, and it showed when MMA fighters boasted too much, where some MMA fighter has a guy on the ropes and is beating the crap out of him, and then he does like his little boogie, to say, I'm going to win.
Yeah.
And he gets knocked to the floor, and he loses. This is what often happens with art, is that you get these people like a David Foster Wallace, who doesn't understand anything of what went wrong in, say, Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, in, say, Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, or a couple of other shit books, North and South, or the Mason-Dixon line. So he has a book on that I've read parts of that's all atrocious. So you get a moron like David Foster Wallace, and instead of saying, what they're trying to do technically is not why the thing fails. It's just he doesn't have the characters developed. He doesn't have the situations that naturally evolve from him. He's just throwing shit at stuff and wanting you to do it. So instead of actually saying, Pynchon might have had something, David Foster Wallace, should go in and deepen the stuff so that there is a textual reason for all the shit that's thrown on the wall. No, he says, I'm going to go and I'm going to throw more shit on the wall. And the more shit that I throw, I'm going to say, I'm taking the baton, in a 400-meter race from Pynchon, and my throwing more shit is somehow grand and shows I got what this is all about. No, asshole. What you're doing is just throwing more shit like a fucking monkey that's throwing its feces at the people at a zoo that are looking through the bars, and the people going, oh, the monkey threw shit at me. No. And it shows fundamentally that Pynchon did not understand anything of what Joyce was trying to do, and I understand what Joyce was trying to do. He just did it very poorly because his mind was syphilitic and infected with the disease, and he had no ability to do it. And even if it wasn't infected with syphilis, he didn't have it to do it. Someone like Pynchon comes along a few decades later, and he doesn't get that, and so he just says, "I'm going to go and make even worse characters." And as noxious as Finnegan's Wake is, at least it has a kind of music to it. There are passages that are very alliterative, usually poorly alliterative, but you could tell that Joyce was trying for something. You can tell that Pynchon isn't even really trying. If you don't believe it, look at what Kurt Vonnegut did. Vonnegut and what he was doing in the 60s and 70s at his apex is what Joyce would have wanted to have gotten to eventually. And then you get David Foster Wallace, and again, he's just flinging monkey shit out there. And you get all these other fucking William Volman. Have you ever read William Volman's shit? It's just garbage. It's just utter garbage. something like the Vincetti brothers or like a Norwegian in the Family, when you get to read, you'll see it. This is postmodernism, but it's postmodernism suffused with the best of what was pre-modern. The development of characters, of stories, using little melodramatic moments that you could get in a fucking soap opera, but bringing them in or you could get melodrama from the ancient Greek classics and infuse it in. These guys don't want to do that because they're fucking lazy. They're not only stupid and don't get the very things that they are propounding, but they are essentially lazy. I'm not stupid and I'm not lazy, and I also have great talent. That's why we're talking.
I don't want to linger too much on David Foster Wallace, but not just Foster Wallace, but you could throw in all those names you just added. Why is it exactly that we got to this point where people think? Because I can't tell you how many people I've met who have never read David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, yet they've never read it because they probably get really bored watching it, but they still think he's an unparalleled genius. Why is it we have this point where the really good writers are seemingly being ignored, and these really like objectively bad ones are being praised so much? What happened?
It's all artists. It's not just writers. It's painters. You know, I've talked with Ethan Pinch many a time, and I've done some of these shows with him, and you know, he will praise some awful art. He'll put it up awful art. Even my wife Jessica, who's friends with him, great friends with him, you know, will be like, "What the fuck is he?" You know, he'll put up some brown squiggle with a green thing on it and act as if it's genius. And then he'll see, you know, a great piece of art by someone like Jiwei too, and it'll go over his head, or he'll denigrate it because it's easy to latch onto simplistic bullshit. You know, you don't. Stanley Kubrick, you can't just be passively watching Stanley Kubrick. You have to pay attention to a Stanley Kubrick or an Orson Welles film. You can watch, you know, a Marvel movie, and you know, you come back every 10 minutes. Oh, Captain America did that. 10 minutes later, oh, Captain America did that. Oh, Iron Man and Captain America quarreled. Oh, I got the movie, the essence of the movie. It's not deep. People are, and they'll use the excuse, oh, life is so much harder now. Fuck you. Are you kidding me? Life isn't so much harder now. Try being, forget even about slavery or genocide, the worst aspects of the past. Just try being a fucking serf in Russia or in medieval Germany. Try being, you know, a serf on a feudal farm, you know, in Austria or wherever this stuff was going. I mean, your life is so much easier. People have so much more free time. Even if we had the technology, let's say, of the internet back 300 years ago, they wouldn't have the farming technology. People would still have to be working 16 hours a day. They wouldn't have the time to go online and watch all this. Now we have all this free time. And what do people do? They don't fucking look up historian videos, and most of them are shit too. And it amazes me when I watch a video on history or something and people get things wrong. But you know, they'll go on and they'll watch this shit. They'll watch or they'll watch you know, a show about some political crap, and it's just the same shit. There's no depth brought to it, but they'll waste their time watching this. They'll waste their time watching this Depp and Heard trial. They'll waste their time watching someone giving makeup tips. They'll waste their time watching someone pontificate for the 10,000th time on, you know, Taxi Driver. Is it really a dream, or is the end real with Travis Bickle in that final scene? As if it hasn't been explored and debunked 1,000 times, 10,000 times before. They'll just go on because they want to throw their shit out there. They are like Wallace, just flinging the monkey shit and hoping that someone in 50 or 100 years will watch it. And some of them don't even care about that. They just want to get their 20,000 or 40,000 or 50,000 or 250,000 views so that they can hit whatever level of goal that they get paid for their junk. You know, I'm never going to make a dime with these videos because intelligent talk, you know, I think I have, over the course of 7 years of my Dan Schneider video interviews, I have maybe 7 or 8 videos that are more than 10,000 views. But since they accrued over such a long period of time, even if I had them monetized, I might have made, $4.32 over the years or some ridiculous figure like that. So when I do these videos, these are gifts to explain my art and other people's arts along the way, that if you take what I'm saying and you apply my thoughts to a Kubrick film, say, you'll be able to get something more from that. Most people, they just want to make a little bit of money. They want to make this money. They don't care if the science they're saying is wrong. They don't care if what they talk about abortion is wrong. They don't care if they're talking about stuff regarding free will that has been debunked for decades. They'll act as if you have people who make videos that get 250,000 hits in 2 or 3 or views in 2 or 3 weeks talking about the flat earth as if that's a serious topic. Literally, 2022. Oh, I don't believe the earth is round. Most of these people actually do. They only do that because they know that there are troglodytes out there that will click on this. Oh man, some moron who made some shit film in 2003 about the flat earth. I got to listen to what this fuck up says. This is why there's so much shit out there. Most people don't have the ability to wade through the shit. You don't have to. Yeah, it's like, who's going to wade hip deep in of David Foster Wallace Infinite Jest for the 17 sentences in that whole book that are competently written? And why would you wade through such shit for 17 competent sentences? I'll have 17 great sentences in a row by page 3 of most books that I've written. It's people don't have the time. They don't want to make the time because and a lot of times they do have shit jobs. And this gets into the politics of that we live in an era where stupidity is encouraged. This is why Donald Trump becomes president. Not that Joe Biden is any great shakes, but people won't even vote against the Democrats and Republicans. That's why abortion is going to go away as a right, and people are going to have to fight, mostly women, but people too of good conscience will fight for 5 or 6 or 10 years, and we'll get it reinstated in most of the states. And the other states cut off the funding to them. Again, I'm getting into but there is such such a morass of stupidity in America, mostly in America, because we're the dominant country. American pop culture, unfortunately, rules the world. Not that other countries have such great pop culture. K-pop from Korea is not the best of Korea, but K-pop is a minor little thing compared to the Hollywood machinery, And that's why the world is flooded with stupidity. That's why when Alex Sherman does a video about Jordan Peterson, a moron. This was Jordan Peterson saw this fat girl on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and he had to call her ugly recently. Did you see that in the last? It was on. This is one of the things. Other than the Depp trial, Jordan Peterson makes a comment about a fat Asian girl who's the first fat Asian to be on Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. And it's all over the media here in this country. As if this is important. We have icebergs the size of American states that are breaking off of Antarctica and melting in our oceans. And we're worried about a moron like Jordan Peterson, his comments about a fat Asian girl being on the cover of Sports Illustrated. This is the level of what engages most minds in this fucking world today. This is why we have global warming. This is why tens of millions of people will die because of tragedies that will occur because of global warming, even though the species won't die. But we'll look back in 300 or 400 years and say, what the fuck was wrong with those people? They sacrificed 50, 100, 150 million human beings just because they wanted to be a little bit more comfortable and live in an air-conditioned room so that they could read about the navel-gazing about Hollywood celebrities or K-pop celebrities or this, that, or the other thing, or idiots who put up fucking flat earth videos. That's why you have it, Ned, because people are dumb fucking monkeys who want to pick the nits off of other people and eat the nits because that gives them some sense of, oh, I did something important. I picked a nit off the ass of my fellow human monkey.
Well, let's just hope it's a phase that we're passing through.
I think it will be.
Because
I mean, I
Yeah.
think that by the mid to end of this century, people will have put aside political correctness. They will put aside multiculturalism. I think black people will say, look, I don't want to be represented by the worst of black artists. I want great black artists. And they will discover people like James Emanuel, who I'll probably end up doing a play about, a great black poet that was in contact with me years ago before he died, almost a decade ago. But these things cycle. And we are in the absolute gutter, the bottom end of a 40-year cycle so far. Hopefully, by the time I'm ready to kick off this earth, things will have gotten better. People will have discovered me through videos like this, discover Cosmoetica. Maybe Alex is thinking of starting a small press to publish my and Jessica's and Bruce Arias and some other writers of quality's work. Hopefully, those things will lead to other things, which will lead to other things, and people will say, boy, wasn't the start of this third millennium a real shithole for art? Let's look to people like the Dan Schneiders and not the David Foster Wallaces or the Thomas Pynchons of the world. And I think they will, but it'll be some time coming.
I think they will too. I actually have a quote that I'm looking at it right now, ties them together. What you're saying right now. Oh God! In my copy, it's page 2,533. Yeah. But let me see. It's about. In my notes, I titled it "Mobsters and McDonald's." The beginning part of it is the problem is we have an economy whose currency is pelf, not merit. The deserts around them come validity of a meritocracy will never be realized as long as humans value shiny baubles over good ideas, their own temporal benefit over long-term success for the many, and capitalism, communism, and every system of wealth and governments buys into these flawed notions of currency. And that ratio for Jews, I'd use in reverse, i.e. businessmen or cops. Only a few percent are not corrupt. In the case of cops, I define corrupt not only as those on the take of a drug dealer or local crime lord, but those who break the law themselves, steal drugs down to the scared little cop who, needing to fulfill his monthly ticket quota and too scared to stand up to his desk sergeant, writes the needed few dozen extra tickets on the last day of the month just so he doesn't get in trouble. What is it to him if some sucker has to take a day off to go to court where the system is rigged against the little guy anyways? All of these are signs of corruption, and business is as bad or worse than any other endeavor, including organized crime. And all of this is done solely for the love of pelf, rather than the currency of accomplishment, which can benefit all mankind. Almost done. This is, by definition, corruption, and is fundamentally so. I can sooner respect a corner pimp or a dope dealer, which is an interesting idea, trying to keep his head above water by avoiding indentured servitude at McDonald's or Walmart, possibly the largest criminal organization in the species' history, than I can the middle management paper pusher who sold his scruples to the massa, who bends him over in his cubicle and sodomizes him hourly. Quotes like Forbes are just so naive, dumb, disingenuous, and out of touch with the reality of the human condition that it truly makes me wonder what world he lives in. I guess the rich truly are different, a different state of permanent narcosis. In the very end, you just say, so let me end with this admonition, all these years hence, that although the American mobster is often rightly denigrated for his human capacity, or lack thereof, to feel and empathize, one should not underrate him in terms of compassion for those he actually cares for. The mobster can be ingenious and vicious, but these are not evil qualities in and of themselves, merely tools that can be used for good or ill. And as a thinking man, an American with pride in many aspects of the greater whole, I may despise. I assert this with no prejudice or shame. Think of all this what you will.
Yeah, well, that's a good comment. And the only thing I would change is say that now Amazon has surpassed Walmart as probably the greatest
Amazon,
enterprise.
yes, Amazon, maybe it does. Yes, as a side note, I really enjoy coming to the end of your chapters because you almost always. This one was more, this is more little to tell you what your opinions on this, but the one about Gino or the one with Big Frank, it's a very transcendent ending. I never can quite. I never know what's going to happen until it very happens.
I've said this before. If you pick up a book and you want to know the quality of the book, look at the chapter ends and the chapter starts. If a writer is not going to end on a high note and begin on a note that grips you, I mean, even you could have even a good solid book that's mediocre, except if the chapter beginnings and ends that tie things together are really good, the book itself is going to be good. I do it throughout it all, but I always make sure to have have something that's going to say, oh, I got to read where we go from here. And when we start a chapter, say, oh, I've got this. There's an image. There's something that you are giving out to other people, and it is incumbent upon the artist to recognize that art is, in its lowest form, entertainment. You have to keep people engaged. If you want to give people the medicine, you have to give them a little sugar, and that's the sugar that gets to people.
Right. Sorry, where were we?
We were ending on I was talking about chapters and beginnings and the need to have them good.
Chapters and beginnings. Right, yes. You know, that's a side note. That's actually something that's very interesting to me. Maybe a lot of writers do it, but I really like to see the title, the first word, the first paragraph. And now that you mentioned it, I guess how someone ends their chapters are actually very important too. I don't know. Those are all the notes I have from Vincetti Brothers. Can I? I know it's a 1,000-page book, and there's other things that will come to me tomorrow to ask you about. But I just began Norwegian in the Family, Norwegian in the Family, and I gotta say it's pretty fucking cool so far. I got to where am I at? I'm at the first chapter with Tony Left, which I'm glad you brought him back. I'm glad he's back. He was a funny guy, you know, messed up. He was fucked up. He's a cool contrast to the Norwegian. He was like, you know, the perfect killer. Killer.
Tony Luft is a dumbass. I mean, in this book, the Vincetti Brothers, there's a scene where he's following Gino, and yet his head is so big, he's hiding behind a little tree, trying to hide from him. And I got that from Charlie Brown cartoons, where Charlie Brown is sometimes hiding behind trees, yet his head is so big. But there is a good scene where this is also based upon a reality, and I wrote a play about this. And I also there was, if you have read True Life.
Yes.
So if you remember in True Life, there's this scene about the guy who wanted to kidnap and rape this girl that he and I worked with.
Yes.
And so that's the same basis of the scene where there's the guy who's captured, and he's in the sub basement of this abandoned building that I think I call him the Voice or something like that in this book. And so that's basically the same character, just in a different state. And Gino stumbles upon him, and Tony Luft is out there waiting to kill him, and he fucks it up, and Gino escapes or whatnot. And we don't really know why Luft is after him, or maybe I give a cursory reason, like maybe, I don't know, does Tony Delaguardo send him after Gino because they want to silence Gino? Yeah, because they want to silence Gino for the Massapequa massacre scene. Let me ask you a few questions though. I mentioned, and speaking of spiders, so I mentioned how I took the rape scene where Gino rapes the ex-girlfriend of Aldo. You know, I describe it in very Cindy McGee. I describe Gino sort of like a spider just on top of her and preying upon her. And one of the things I said is the most important thing, because this book is divided into 4 different types of chapters: the numbered chapters, the Aldo, the Gino, and the Dino chapters. And the rape of Cindy McGee does not take place in a Gino chapter. It takes place in an Aldo chapter. And the reason I did that was the most important thing is not that Gino is raping Cindy, but that Aldo is looking through a keyhole, watching his brother rape his girlfriend, and doesn't intercede until the very end. What did you think about that?
That whole scene is going to be forever burned into my memory. That's the moment, because up to that point I was thinking, maybe there's something good about Gino. Maybe there's something really, besides when he finds the puppy and he cares for a little bit. At that moment, everything just died inside of me. Yeah, but watching as I slowly started reading it, I realized that, wait, Aldo, what are you doing, buddy? Are you going to do anything about it? And he does eventually fight Gino. They eventually have that brawl and everything, but it's very it's very detailed, going into like how he becomes a spider and he's just crazy. He's like ripping her clothes off, and she's screaming, and Aldo's still not doing anything. And even though you mentioned that like this is only a few moments passing, and I still got a very distinct impression that he was I don't know, a pussy. He just couldn't move.
So this quartet, this I call the New York Quartet. I also call the 4M Quartet. The first book, Tumbleweeds, I called a novel of moods, and this book is called a novel of minds. The Norwegian and the Family book is called a novel of men, and then the final book, 64, is a novel of memories. So since you've completed the first two books, a novel of moods, which is Tumbleweeds, and this book, a novel of minds, the Vincetti brothers, do those subtitles mean anything to you, and if so, what and why?
As far as tumbleweeds go, we start tumbleweeds, start chronologically. I thought about the 4M. I thought about the moods. What is the mood that you're trying to communicate here? It really felt like Tumbleweeds was about a particular neighborhood, and it did mirror. I did have some of the stories of true life inside of it, and it felt like I was like on the sidewalk, and I was like absorbing what it was like during that time period of your life, about that neighborhood and the people there. That's the mood that I got. I got the mood of that time of the. I think it was in the 1970s. That's the mood that I got. As far as minds go for Vincetti brothers, how you got behind the eyes of all three of the brothers and all the other characters too. You got to see their inner workings. That was something that was different from Tumbleweeds to me. Tumbleweeds didn't so much have that. You had Lincoln Webb, but they were also kids, and their thoughts were not always so complex, even though when complex things happen to them. And so that's what I saw. And your comparison that the first one's like your take on the Great American Novel.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is your take on like a moralistic novel. I think that's pretty apt. A novel of minds, you're gonna have to have a lot more thought or something. Sorry, it's pretty late over here. It's hard for me to pull my thoughts together. I work like 10 hours a day.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I thought it was good because one of the things that I remember from Tumbleweeds very well is I just feel like when I think about that book, I feel like I'm just on the stoop, just watching Manny and Lincoln Webb, or I'm in the with Alyosha McCall, and I'm watching them play chess or something. There is a feeling there. I wish I could articulate this better, but I just can't. But then, yeah, the novel of minds, and of course, it's 1,000+ pages of very minute details of what these characters are thinking. It seems to work for me. Yeah, I felt like it was.
So a few more questions, and I'll let you go since it's late. The book, Vincetti Brothers, opens what I call an odd form of exculpation for the readers. What did you think of that little thing?
I reread it just a couple hours ago. I thought it was very funny. It was cool. It was interesting. It was in the Vincetti Brothers. You get to Let me just pull it up real quick. I thought it was very interesting how you quoted that man, the writer who your wife was talking to.
Yeah.
Back to it. An odd form of exculpation. That's really funny. I said. I thought it was good. I assume you wrote it at the very end.
Actually, that was one of the first things I wrote.
Okay, that's interesting. I always imagined it was at the very end. Yeah, and you talk about how Tumbleweeds is written to be more in the mood to be literary to the Great American Novel. Well, I did that. Now it's to show me a book that surpasses it. It was funny. It was very witty. It really set the stage for me. I was like, oh man. I think I mentioned last time because I had read this much of Vincetti Brothers last time we talked about True Life, and I was saying how it feels like rock and roll to me. Now, after reading Norwegian and the Family, at the beginning of Norwegian and the Family, the trailers, that's actually more rock and roll. I have some comments on that later. Yeah, it's cool. It sets the scene. I'm really not sure. I'm sure other people have noticed much more interesting things. Having the man from Moo Moo Press. What's his name? That whole essay that he wrote, that preface to the work that he was publishing, it was an interesting little. It's interesting that you didn't just choose some really bad form of writing, because clearly the man's talented, and clearly the man's funny. He's kind of witty, kind of crass, but kind of witty too at the same time. I thought it was interesting, and it really was a good way to contrast what the rest of the novel was.
And a couple other things, like I said. The book's main epigraph comes right after that. Life does not consist mainly, or even largely, of facts and happenings. It consists mainly of the storm of thoughts that is forever blowing through one's head. And that's from Mark Twain's autobiography, Volume 1. Getting back to the idea of the novel of minds, did that give you any pause or thoughts, that epigraph?
Well, besides having this book as a novel of minds and having that in there, I remember I did pause on that a little bit. Life does not consist mainly and largely of facts and happenings. Yeah, to me, it just reminded me of consciousness and how we're not aware of other people's experiences, and even though we're in physical bodies and we feel things, maybe some people don't feel like this, but I do feel like that. Maybe on the outside I'm very calm, but internally there's this like ongoing monologue that just doesn't stop. And maybe that's how, looking back on our memories and stuff, that's what we remember through the prism of through the perspective of our thoughts in the first place. Yeah, it did make me pause.
So we mentioned Moby Dick. That starts off with "Call Me Ishmael," one of the most famous novel openings ever. This book starts off with a sentence that's parenthetical and apart from the rest of it. It's that Paulie Maravelli is dead, and then it explains a bit of it. Did that, and Paulie Maravelli himself is referenced in the book, but he doesn't really make any major appearance. We don't really get, and in my whole corpus, Paulie Maravelli is one of the dominant characters of A Norwegian in the Family, as you've probably seen already if you read a couple hundred pages. But we don't get him here. So what did you think of the opening line, and then the fact that we don't really get much of Paulie just secondhand?
I thought. Sorry, my dog. I thought it was very good. I remember the first thing I saw Paulie Maravelli was dead. I remember in Tumbleweeds, because he was in Tumbleweeds briefly and he died. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's the first thing I remember. So that was the first. I was like, all right, so this book is going to begin around his funeral. That's when he died. And then, yeah, you didn't get too much into him, but that was my reference point for the rest of it. It begins with a dead mobster. A dead mobster. That's where it begins. And so I realized that, okay, it's going to have something to do with this.
Well, within, and as you read further on into Norwegian in the Family, sort of the Schneider fictive cosmos, the death of Paulie Maravelli is sort of ground zero. Everything in that universe sort of leads up to his death. Everything then comes from that death to a certain degree. And the final thing I wanted to just talk about, since we're the first line, I just want to read briefly the closing of the book. The lie, obviously, was in my usage of the auxiliary verb may in the final sentence, rather than simply stating I have been there. Because what I do is I recapitulate the end of Tumbleweeds here at the end of this book, and then I state, so again, the lie obviously was my usage of the auxiliary verb may in the final sentence, rather than simply stating I have been them, for Dan Schneider is not my pseudonym, but my name. Manny Cole is my pseudonym. Well, not really. He is my creation only. Dan Schneider is me. I am him. This was not me. What did you think of that?
Well, I know you probably get a lot of questions about these pseudonyms that you use for yourself. I mean, it's cool. I really love the last line. This is not me. When I read it, I was on Thursday when I finished this. I was pretty floored by the last paragraph right there. I think what most people are going to think of when they see this is like, why put yourself in the book? I guess why do that? What was the part in the novel? What was its place in the novel? And at the very beginning, you have that, which I laughed out loud when you said Manny Cole speaking, and he's like, some of you think that the name of the man on this book, Dan Schneider, is really me. Well, no, that's my pseudonym. And there's another motherfucker, cocksucking, whatever. I think that's like a direct quote. Another sucking, motherfucking, cocksucking, whoever who's claiming to be Dan Schneider. That guy's whatever, like that. And then you end it with this, where it's like, oh no, it was me the whole time. Of course, we know that. I guess. I thought it was interesting. I think it's another way to weave into like the story, to bring yourself but not into yourself. It reminds me of True Life too, where not everything you remember is actually accurate. So I guess it gives you a platform to actually change things around and be artistic.
The reason I asked is because I tried to tie it in with the beginning quote from Mark Twain, in that, he ends Huckleberry Finn with, I'm going out westward. I've been there before or something. So I wanted to have that same kind, not the exact same sentiment, but the sentiment that that this person, whoever it is, Dan or Manny or whoever, has moved on from here. This is not me. Doesn't mean that I'm not the person who wrote the book. It could also mean that this is not me any longer, meaning I'm not Manny Cole. I'm not that type of person. I just wondered if you might have gotten that from that.
Now that I read it again, perhaps. I mean, yeah, I guess I could literally work on a few levels like that. But I was thinking, I mostly just think of Manny Cole and the Dan Schneider Manny Cole connection. That's really what I'm thinking of when I see this.
Okay. Well, unless you have any final thoughts, I want to thank you for talking with me about it. Anyone who has, there's probably half a dozen people out there who have emailed me in the last 6 months or so wanting the book. So maybe if they see this, maybe I can get their opinions about it when they hopefully get back to me. Some of them never get back to me. But I thank you also for bruiting the book. Hopefully maybe you get some of your Chinese friends over there that want to read that not all Americans are stupid assholes, and there's actually some intelligent people on this side of the Pacific. But again, thanks for reading it, and let me know. I don't know if it'll be 6 months or a year from now that you get done with A Norwegian in the Family. When you ever get done with it, we can do this again.
Yeah, that's a bit longer, isn't it? Yeah, I'm actually really excited to keep reading that one. I mean, the last thing I just want to say is that at the very beginning of the Norwegian with the trailers, and then at the very end where you have the Norwegian, the family coming in like a movie trailer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's small, but I really dug that. That was cool. That was a novel way to begin it.
Yeah. Well, now that's something that, unlike the exculpation, that's something that I had in my mind. I was thinking, how am I going to end this book? Because A Norwegian in the Family is very much like a film, and I'm saying, let me end. And when I would, you can't really. The book is so great that you can't really spoil it. But I would say, don't look at the very end of the book until you get to the end. And when you get to the end with the notes, don't stop at the notes. Keep reading through the notes at the end of the book, because if you notice, there's A Norwegian in the Family by Dan Schneider, and then there's The Norwegian in the Family by Manny Cole. So The Norwegian is a book within the book of A Norwegian in the Family. And read it till literally go to the very last page of the Word document. That's the only thing I'm going to say then. So hopefully we'll do this again some months, maybe by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. So again, thank you, Ned.
Yeah, thank you for sending it to me. This has been a lot of very educating for me. Thank you.